They were the kind of family people envied, educated, well-respected, and quietly prosperous. Dr. Charles Rebello, 54, was a tenured associate professor of mechanical engineering at Westbridge University, a prestigious institution nestled just outside Santa Clara, California. Over the years, he had built a reputation for being methodical, composed, and deeply dedicated to his students. His lectures were precise, his schedule unwavering. He wore the same gray windbreaker to work for 10 years straight. He didn't smile much, but when he did, it was the kind of smile people trusted. His wife, Colleen Rebello, 52, was a former financial analyst turned homemaker. People often said she had a $1 million smile, warm, controlled, and camera-ready. Colleen wasn't flashy, but everyone at the faculty mixers knew she handled the family's money like a hawk. 5 properties under her name. All paid for, or so they thought. Their 2 children were equally accomplished. Alyssa, 28, was a sharp young woman working in federal compliance for the Office of Government Ethics. Matthew, 26, had just started practicing as a licensed dentist in San Jose. The family lived together on the 15th floor of Sterling Hall, a faculty-exclusive residential tower adjacent to campus. The 15th floor was private, just one apartment with a direct elevator key. Large windows overlooked the hills, and from the balcony, you could just about see the Pacific shimmer on clear days. To anyone on the outside, the Rebello family seemed like a blueprint for success. The kind of people who remembered birthdays, filed taxes early, and had matching bath towels for guests. But one quiet August morning in 2018, that illusion began to crumble. It was Monday, August 20th, when Dr. Charles Rebello and his daughter Alyssa walked into the Santa Clara Police Department and filed a missing persons report. The woman they were reporting, Colleen Rebello, had not been seen in 3 days. Charles presented a typed flyer. Missing, Colleen Rebello, 52 years old. 5 feet 3 inches, 132 pounds. Medium build. Shoulder-length black hair. Glasses. Last seen on the morning of Friday, August 17th, leaving the apartment at Sterling Hall, Westbridge University. Charles told the officer that he'd woken up that Friday morning to find his wife gone. At first, he didn't think much of it. He assumed she had gone out early for breakfast or errands. But as the hours passed, and then the weekend, he started to worry. Her phone rang without answer. Texts were left on read. Most unsettling of all, her passport, normally stored in the bedside drawer, was missing. He remembered thinking, maybe she left town. She had done it before, he said. There was precedent. Colleen had a habit of going on short, silent retreats when she felt overwhelmed. Spa weekends in Arizona. A week in Taos with no signal. Charles claimed this was her pattern. But 3 days without a single message? Alyssa, standing beside her father in the police station, looked unconvinced. She was the one who insisted they report it. The police took the report, but from the start, something felt off. When asked about the last time they saw Colleen, Alyssa gave a hesitant answer. She said it had started over a stupid, gross mess. That Thursday night, after a long day at work, she came home to discover that the toilet in the shared bathroom had been sealed with clear packing tape and smeared with chocolate spread, enough to make her gag. Her first instinct was that her mother was behind it. She does weird things sometimes, Alyssa explained. But this was just insane. Colleen hadn't cleaned it. Instead, she locked herself in her bedroom. Alyssa, already exhausted, became furious. She banged on the door with a clothes-drying rod, demanding her mother come out and fix it. Eventually, Colleen opened the door. That's when things got physical. Alyssa admitted to throwing the cleaning supplies to the floor. She pulled her mother by the wrist toward the bathroom. They yelled. Accusations flew. But Colleen remained firm, it wasn't me. At that moment, Charles walked in from work. He glanced at the chaos, then, according to both Alyssa and himself, walked straight to the master bedroom and shut the door. He said he didn't want to get in the middle of another argument. Alyssa, realizing the fight wasn't going anywhere, grabbed her bag and stormed out to stay at a friend's place for the night. She never saw her mother again. The next morning, Charles says he woke up and found Colleen gone. She probably needed space, he told himself. But even he admitted, something about this time felt different. By Monday, after 3 days without contact, Alyssa demanded they go to the police. They printed flyers. Charles looked through security camera footage from the building and found a clip of a woman resembling Colleen leaving Sterling Hall early Friday morning. "It's her," he said confidently. Alyssa agreed at the time. The woman wore similar clothes. Same build. Same hair. But later, she would change her mind. Police followed standard protocol and sent a unit to the Rebello apartment at Sterling Hall. The building was quiet, the 15th floor accessible only by keycard. When the officers entered, they were surprised by what they saw. The Rebello home was a mess. Books and papers covered the living room floor. Magazines lay in clumps across the hallway. In the master bedroom, drawers had been yanked out, their contents scattered. The rest of the apartment looked sterile, pristine even. But that room? It looked like it had been torn apart. That's when they noticed something else. Matthew, the younger son, was home. They spoke with him briefly. He seemed calm, if a little uncomfortable. He told the officers something strange. The chocolate in the bathroom? That was him. A prank. A joke. Not his mother. Suddenly, the argument that Alyssa had had with Colleen, the one she thought was about disrespect, looked very different. Guilt flickered across her face. She had accused her mother of something she didn't do. She had grabbed her, screamed at her, and left the apartment in anger, all over a misunderstanding. That was the last time they spoke. And now, her mother was gone. The officers took notes. Nothing in the home proved foul play. No blood. No signs of forced entry. No struggle, at least not visibly. But the disarray in the bedroom lingered in their minds. As did Charles's odd behavior. He was cooperative, polite, mild-mannered. But there was something else, a controlled detachment, too calm for a man whose wife had vanished. When the officers left that night, they didn't say anything out loud. But something wasn't adding up. A woman had vanished from a locked, secure, high-floor apartment. No witnesses. No phone pings. No credit card use. And a family that had all the right answers, too quickly. They didn't know it yet, but the most important clue of all was already moving down the building in a wooden box. It was supposed to be a harmless joke. That's what Matthew Rebello would later tell police when they asked him about the chocolate. The sealed toilet seat. He said he wasn't trying to upset anyone. He was just tired of being ignored. But in a house where silence was currency and tension hung in the air like smoke, even a joke could explode into something far more dangerous. When officers questioned Matthew on the evening of August 20th, he seemed composed, cooperative even. He sat on the edge of the modern sectional sofa, hands folded loosely between his knees, answering every question with the clipped politeness of someone raised to be careful with words. What he said changed the direction of the entire case. The mess in the bathroom? That wasn't his mother's doing. It was his. He explained that on the evening of August 16th, he'd come home after a long shift at his dental clinic. He went to use the main bathroom, the one shared with guests, and found that the toilet seat had been removed. Not broken. Removed. Replaced with a flimsy old one, yellowed with age. One he hadn't seen in years. And he knew exactly who had done it. It wasn't the first time. Matthew said his mother, Colleen, had a habit of taking household items and repurposing them in other properties. The family owned 5 rental units around the university, small apartments Colleen had invested in, refurbished, and rented out to faculty and graduate students over the years. She took pride in every single one. It was, in her words, her real portfolio. But she had a tendency to cut corners. When a tenant complained about a cracked toilet seat or a missing shelf, she didn't always buy a new one. Sometimes she just took something from their own home, quietly without asking. Matthew said she once replaced a new vacuum in their hallway closet with a second-hand one from a garage sale. This time, it was his toilet seat. And it wasn't the money that bothered him, it was the idea of using something that had been in someone else's home. He described himself as a germaphobe. He wiped down doorknobs twice a day. He carried alcohol wipes in his car. Replacing his seat with someone else's used one felt, to him, like a violation. So he decided to get back at her. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He planned a prank. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, he crept into his parents' bathroom. He unrolled a long sheet of clear packing tape and carefully sealed the edges of the toilet. Then, for dramatic effect, he spread chocolate sauce across the seat, a childish imitation of something grotesque. Then he tiptoed back to his room, put on headphones, and played video games until 2 a.m. He didn't hear the fight that came next. Alyssa, his sister, hadn't known. When she came home and found the scene, her anger flared instantly. She assumed it was their mother, and she lashed out. She banged on Colleen's bedroom door, shouted, dragged her toward the bathroom, demanded she clean it up. Colleen, in turn, locked herself in her room and refused. What no one realized that night, what no one understood until days later, was that Colleen had been falsely accused. Matthew sat quietly in the other room, listening to music. His prank, so small in his mind, had escalated into a violent argument, one of many in the Rebello household, but this one would be the last. When Matthew told police about the prank, Alyssa went silent. She stood by the hallway wall, lips slightly parted, processing what she'd just heard. "I thought it was her," she finally said, barely audible. "She just didn't care. I came home tired, and it was disgusting, and she looked at me like it didn't matter." Her voice cracked. "But she didn't do it. And I made her feel like she had." Detectives noted the exchange carefully. In isolation, it might have been written off as a family miscommunication. But given the timing, the argument, Colleen's disappearance, the strange disarray in the master bedroom, it took on a more sinister tone. What if the prank hadn't just triggered an argument? What if it had triggered something worse? Charles Rebello maintained his story. His wife left that morning. She took her passport. Maybe she needed space. He said she had done it before. But the officers weren't convinced. They asked to see building surveillance footage from the morning of August 17th. Charles pulled it up on his office computer. There, grainy but visible, was a woman resembling Colleen stepping into the elevator around 6:41 a.m. She wore a tan coat, hair tied back. She carried a black shoulder bag. "That's her," Charles said immediately. "That's Colleen." Matthew nodded too. But something about the image lingered in the officers' minds. The woman's gait was off. The posture, not quite right. She never looked at the camera. The resolution was poor, but her shoes were unfamiliar. They flagged it anyway, just in case. Then came a strange observation. When officers returned to Sterling Hall the next day, Charles was in the parking garage. He was pushing a cart. On top of the cart, a wooden box about the size of a small table, covered with a dust sheet. On top, a microwave, some kitchen utensils, a roll of duct tape. He looked up as the officers approached, but didn't acknowledge them. "Professor Rebello," one of them called out. He kept walking. It wasn't until they pulled up beside him in their car and got out that he stopped, adjusted his glasses, and offered a forced smile. "Sorry," he said, "I didn't hear you." They asked what was in the box. He said it was just old supplies, kitchen things, being moved from the apartment to his office in preparation for the fall semester. With new students moving in, he wanted to make space at home. The officers looked at the box, then at each other. It was sealed. No labels. No open flaps. Just tightly nailed wood. A layer of dust. An odd faint smell. But they had no warrant and no probable cause yet. So they let him go. Charles walked to his car, opened the trunk, and slowly loaded the box inside. He drove away. Back at the apartment, the officers interviewed someone new. Colleen's younger sister, Cynthia Lowry, had flown in from Seattle after Colleen disappeared. She'd been staying in the apartment a few nights earlier. That was when she said something that would shift the case again. She said she had seen Charles on the night of August 16th. Inside the bedroom. On top of Colleen. And she thought they were being intimate. But now, looking back, she wasn't so sure. Sometimes, the truth doesn't scream. It whispers behind closed doors. Inside sealed boxes. Under the calm voice of a man who spent decades hiding discomfort with routine. By August 21st, the Santa Clara Police Department had quietly shifted their investigation. What began as a standard missing persons report was now a potential homicide case. There was no formal announcement, no warrants, no press conference. But detectives were watching Dr. Charles Rebello very closely. The footage of the woman leaving the building still didn't sit right. At first, it was Alyssa and Matthew who had confidently said it was their mother. But when detectives asked Alyssa again, her tone changed. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "I thought it was her. I wanted it to be her. But now she wasn't sure." And Matthew, once certain, now hedged his words. "I didn't really look that closely," he said. Yeah, I guess it could have been someone else." It was a subtle shift. But for detectives, it was enough. They returned to Sterling Hall with a different strategy. Not to search, but to observe. That's when they spotted him again. Charles. In the garage. With the cart. The same wooden box. Same dust cover. Same strange, unsettling posture as he wheeled it across the lot. They called out. He ignored them. Only when they stepped out of their car and stood in his path did he stop. "Professor Rebello," one of them said, "going somewhere?" He blinked. "Oh, just to my office," he said, with that measured politeness that had become part of the problem. The box, he explained, was filled with supplies for incoming students. Kitchen gear. A few microwaves. Some leftover electronics. Nothing unusual, he said. But now, everything about him was beginning to feel unusual. Let's pause here for a moment. The apartment at Sterling Hall was not small. It was a university-furnished 3-bedroom unit with more than enough space for 4 adults. If Charles was simply clearing out clutter, why now? Why this specific box? Why the secrecy? The officers didn't have a warrant to open the box. So they let him go, again. But they took note of every movement. And then, back inside the apartment, they found Cynthia. Cynthia Lowry, Colleen's younger sister, had flown down from Seattle the day before. She'd stayed with the Rebellos briefly in early August, before Colleen went missing. And now, she was ready to talk. The night of August 16th, Cynthia had been sleeping on the living room couch. She remembered the argument between Alyssa and Colleen. She had heard the yelling, the banging, the stomping back and forth. But she chose not to intervene. She figured it was just another mother-daughter squabble. Around midnight, the apartment had finally gone quiet. She drifted into sleep. But at 12:30 a.m., she woke up to a noise. A heavy thud. Then a rhythmic creaking, like furniture being shifted. She got up and walked toward the hallway. The door to the master bedroom was ajar, just slightly. She looked inside. There, dimly lit by the ambient glow of a reading lamp, she saw Charles. He was on top of Colleen. She gasped, quietly turned around, and returned to the couch. At the time, she assumed they were being intimate. But now she wasn't so sure. "I remember thinking, it sounded strange," she told police. If they were being romantic, why was there a thump? And why did she look so still? She hadn't thought to question it, until Colleen disappeared. And when she asked Charles where her sister had gone, he insisted Colleen was just on a break, visiting friends. He begged her not to get police involved. Said it would only make things worse. That he'd take care of it. But Cynthia's doubts grew. By the time she saw him pushing the cart, she didn't believe a word he said. The police now had a theory. It was just a theory. But it made a lot of sense. Charles had access to the entire faculty building. Sterling Hall had 16 floors. The 15th was theirs. The 16th? Vacant. Reserved for maintenance equipment and rarely used storage. What if, after killing his wife, Charles hadn't removed her body immediately? What if he'd stored it temporarily upstairs? What if the box they saw him pushing wasn't full of student supplies? But the body itself? The box was heavy. Roughly 3 feet long, about 2 feet wide. Detectives pulled the building schematics. There were only 2 keycards with 24/7 access to the 16th floor. One belonged to facilities management. The other? Dr. Charles Rebello. The following day, detectives searched his office. Located in the Rowan Engineering Building, Charles's faculty office was tucked into a corner on the 7th floor. When they stepped in, they were surprised. It didn't look like an office. More like a storage shed. Stacks of old textbooks. Random wires. Broken appliances. Tools. And a faint smell. It wasn't obvious at first. But the longer they stayed, the more they noticed it. Something foul. Rotten. They asked Charles where the box had gone. He said he'd disassembled it, tossed it, or moved it to another office. He wasn't sure. His answers grew vague. Fractured. When they asked again, he got agitated. You think I hurt her? He snapped. Is that what this is about? Then, moments later, he softened. Apologized. Said he was under stress. That he hadn't slept in days. But the police weren't backing off. They asked to see his other office. Down the hall. Charles led them silently. Inside, 6 wooden panels. Unmarked. As if recently washed. It was the remains of the box. But no suitcase. No blood. No body. Not yet. That night, something else happened. Back at the station, detectives received a call from Alyssa. Her father had just sent a strange message to the family group chat. I'm sorry for everything. Please take care of each other. I just wanted peace. She begged them to watch him closely. They rushed to his office the next morning. When they entered, the smell hit them immediately. This time, it was unmistakable. And under his desk was a box. Not disassembled. Not discarded. Not forgotten. Just waiting. August 23rd. 10:12 in the morning. Rowan Engineering Building, room 714. It was the kind of office that had stopped being an office a long time ago. The blinds hadn't been raised in weeks. The desk was covered in layers, papers, broken cables, circuit board fragments. There were no signs of teaching, no sign of students. Just clutter. Just silence. And then, the smell. 2 officers stood just inside the door. A third crouched next to the wooden box, placed awkwardly beneath a corner table, almost hidden, but not enough. They didn't need a warrant now. Not anymore. Dr. Rebello, one detective asked calmly, is your wife in the box? For the first time since this all began, Charles didn't speak. He didn't protest. He didn't deny. He nodded. Barely perceptible. And then he closed his eyes. The box was handmade, roughly 3 feet long, just over 2 feet wide, 13 inches tall. Sturdy plywood, secured with long metal nails and sealed with clear tape along the seams. Officers pried it open slowly. The dust sheet on top was folded back. Inside, a black suitcase, water-damaged around the zipper. It was leaking. When they unzipped it, the contents were unmistakable. Colleen Rebello's body was curled into the suitcase, her knees bent tightly against her chest. She wore only her undergarments. Her skin was discolored, bloating, early signs of decomposition brought on by heat and humidity. Wrapped around her neck was a thin electrical cord. No obvious bruises or lacerations. No broken bones. No signs of a struggle, just that single mark. A ligature. And underneath that mark, silence. The coroner's report would later confirm it. Mechanical asphyxiation. Time of death, likely between midnight and 2 a.m. on the night of August 16th. Exactly when Cynthia heard the thump. Exactly when Charles had been seen on top of her sister, through a half-closed door. It had never been intimacy. It had been the final act of a marriage that had long since lost its tenderness. Back at the station, Charles Rebello sat for questioning. This time, the tone had changed. He didn't bring a lawyer. He didn't argue. He told them the truth. Or, at least, his version of it. He said the night started like any other. He came home from lectures around 8 p.m., exhausted. Walked in on a shouting match between Alyssa and Colleen. Didn't want to get involved. So he didn't. He went straight to bed. Later, around midnight, Colleen joined him. They lay in silence for nearly an hour, scrolling their phones, barely speaking. Then she asked him to get her something to drink. Orange juice, he said. She always drank a small glass before bed. He poured it, brought it to her. She sipped once, paused, then glared at him. This is spoiled, she snapped. Charles said he tried to explain. The juice wasn't spoiled, it was a different brand. Alyssa had bought it. But Colleen didn't believe him. She threw the glass against the wall, he recalled. Told me to get dressed and take it back to the store. He refused. She called him names. Then she called Alyssa, screaming at her to come home and return the juice. When Alyssa refused, Colleen turned on him again. She said I was useless. That without her, we'd be homeless. That all I brought into this family was a meager paycheck. Charles claimed she hit him, kicked him off the bed. He reached under the frame to grab his slippers. That's when his hand touched the cord. That's when something snapped. He wrapped it around her neck. Pulled until she stopped moving. She didn't fight, he said. She didn't scream. It only took a minute. He sat there for a while. Then stood. Then panicked. He didn't know what to do. So he put her body in a suitcase. The next morning, Cynthia asked where Colleen was. He lied. Said she went on a trip. Then he took Matthew to work, came home alone, and moved the suitcase to the balcony. The heat worried him. The smell. So on August 18th, he built a wooden box using planks from Home Depot. Lined it. Sealed it. Stored it temporarily on the 16th floor, in a corner behind some janitorial equipment. He figured it'd be safe, no one went up there. Then Alyssa insisted on going to the police. He panicked again. Reviewed the building footage. Found a woman who resembled Colleen. Clung to it. Showed it to police. Said, look, that's her. But it wasn't. He knew it wasn't. He held onto the lie. Until the smell returned. Until the box felt too close to discovery. So on August 22nd, he moved it again, to his office. And when detectives spotted him with the cart, he lied again. The only thing he couldn't lie to anymore was the smell. The formal arrest came that night. He didn't resist. He was charged with second-degree murder and unlawful disposal of a body. He was denied bail. And the Rebello family, once a model of academic civility, became the center of one of the most shocking domestic crime cases in California that year. Alyssa and Matthew were stunned. They said they never imagined it would come to this. But detectives weren't so sure. They had more questions. About that suitcase. About the behavior during the investigation. About who knew what and when. Because while Charles may have been the one who tied the cord, someone else may have helped hide the truth. In family photos, Colleen Rebello always smiled. It was her trademark, subtle, controlled, poised. A smile that suggested confidence, grace, and balance. But now, in every media headline, that smile had a new meaning. The smile of a woman no one thought could be murdered. By August 24th, the discovery of her body had already leaked to local press. The story spread quickly. Professor's wife found dead in faculty office. Body hidden in box. Husband charged with murder. But the most common headline was simpler, colder. He said she was on vacation. To those outside the Rebello home, it was shocking. To those within it, not everything felt so black and white. As detectives prepared their case, they began re-examining every statement, every inconsistency. Something wasn't adding up. There was the strange behavior of Charles. There was Alyssa's misidentification of the woman in the footage. But one detail nagged at investigators most. Matthew Rebello, the 26-year-old son, had said very little throughout the investigation. He cooperated, answered what was asked. But when detectives played back his interviews, they noticed something strange. He'd told them early on that his mother had replaced his toilet seat again. That she'd taken the newer one for a rental property and left him with an old, stained one. He was furious, he said. And that's why he played the prank. The prank that caused the argument. Which pushed Alyssa to lash out. Which, possibly, triggered the final collapse that night. But here's the thing. No tenant ever reported a broken toilet seat. Detectives tracked down every one of the 5 renters Colleen managed. None of them had requested a replacement. None recalled seeing her that week. One of them, in fact, hadn't even spoken to her in over 2 months. So where did the missing toilet seat go? And why did Matthew bring it up at all? More importantly, what else wasn't he saying? It got stranger. During the initial search, when officers reviewed the surveillance footage, Matthew had been the first to confirm, confidently, that the woman in the elevator was his mother. Before even seeing the footage clearly. He just nodded and said, "Yeah, that's her." But when the woman's shoes were pointed out, black flats Colleen never wore, Matthew hesitated. "Oh, I didn't notice," he said. Still, he didn't retract his identification. That raised a question. Was Matthew trying to mislead the investigation? Or was he just overwhelmed? Was he covering for someone? Charles Rebello confessed. He told the story of a moment of rage. A cord under the bed. A glass of orange juice. A broken marriage finally snapping. He said no one helped him. He said the box, the moving, the lying, he did it all alone. But when detectives pressed further, his answers grew vaguer. "Where did you store the box first?" "I think upstairs. The 16th floor." "Did you carry it alone?" "I believe so." "Did Matthew know?" Silence. During his final pretrial interview, Charles said something unusual. "I'm the only one responsible," he said quietly. "Don't drag the kids into this. They've lost enough." To prosecutors, that sounded like guilt. To detectives, it sounded like protection. Meanwhile, the coroner's report came back with one more note. Colleen had no defensive wounds. No bruises on her arms, no signs of struggle. Which was strange, considering her strength and health. She would have fought back, Cynthia, her sister, told investigators. She was proud. Even stubborn. She didn't take abuse quietly. And there was another thing. Traces of antihistamines were found in her bloodstream. Not enough to kill, but enough to sedate. The kind commonly found in over-the-counter sleep aids. Charles swore he hadn't drugged her. Said she took something every night to help with sleep. But investigators weren't convinced. Was Colleen already groggy when the fight started? Was she unable to resist? Was that why there were no bruises? Was someone else in the room? The suitcase itself, the one used to conceal her body, was a travel bag belonging to Matthew. His initials were inside. Detectives asked Charles about it. He said, "It was the biggest one I could find." That was all. But perhaps the most haunting question came from Colleen's sister. Cynthia sat in the corner of the courtroom during the pretrial hearing, holding a worn photo of Colleen in her lap. She whispered to one of the officers, "If she was killed in her sleep, why did no one hear her scream?" She wasn't asking rhetorically. The Rebello apartment had thin walls. A shared hallway. 2 adult children just a few feet away. So how was it that no one heard a thing? Unless someone knew it was happening. Or worse, helped make it happen. Back in the courtroom, Charles kept his head down. He didn't make eye contact with Alyssa or Matthew. He didn't speak. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, he replied simply, "I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness." But even as the charges were read, investigators continued building their timeline. Not just of the murder, but of the family dynamic that preceded it. What made this marriage rot from the inside? What made a man so cold, so practiced in hiding discomfort, finally snap? And what did the son know, sitting in the next room, with a suitcase outside his door? At first, the suitcase was just an object. A black nylon travel bag. Standard size. Not particularly remarkable, until it was found with a body inside. But in a case filled with cracks, this one detail never faded. Because stamped into the fabric lining, barely visible beneath wear and dust, were 3 faint letters. Matthew Rebello. The son of the man who confessed. The same man who said he acted alone. But now, investigators were no longer sure. They went back through every file, every word. Matthew had been there the night his mother died. He'd been in the next room. He'd seen the argument that preceded it. He'd heard, or claimed he hadn't heard, anything after. He also said something else, that the suitcase wasn't his. That one? "We all shared luggage," he'd said during the first interview. "I don't even remember using it last." But that wasn't true. They found an airport baggage tag deep in the side pocket. Oakland to Boston. April 2018. Passenger. Rebello. It was his bag. Not just circumstantially. Provably. So why lie? Why, in a family full of secrets, was Matthew hiding something? They brought him in for a second interview. This time, the tone was different. He was no longer a witness. He wasn't under arrest, but he was under suspicion. The room was small, with neutral walls and a single desk. Matthew sat stiffly, wearing a navy polo shirt and jeans. His eyes were red but dry. A detective sat across from him. "Did you help your father move the body?" Matthew blinked. "What? Did you know what he'd done before he told the police?" "No. Did you ever see the suitcase?" "I don't remember." "Matthew, that bag was yours. You used it 4 months ago. Why would your father choose your bag to hide your mother's body in?" He swallowed. "I don't know." Outside the room, prosecutors watched through a glass pane. They didn't need a confession. They just needed to understand whether Matthew's silence was intentional, whether it was self-preservation or complicity, and whether his father was covering for him or protecting him. The theory was simple if grim. What if Charles hadn't acted alone? What if the argument between Colleen and Alyssa ended, but the tension remained? What if Matthew, hearing the same criticisms, the same belittling from his mother, had his own breaking point? And what if his father helped clean it up? Would Charles lie to protect his son? Would a father, already emotionally detached, already fractured, take the fall for someone he believed had a future? They needed to know. But Charles stuck to his story. Even from jail. Even as the prosecution prepared for trial. "It was all me," he said. "Don't ask the kids. Leave them out of it. I made the box. I chose the suitcase. I did it all alone." But the evidence said otherwise. In Matthew's apartment, they found wood shavings, identical to the type of plywood used in the box. They found tape rolls in his closet that matched the sealant found on the edges. And they found search history on his tablet. How long does a body smell? How to seal a wooden box airtight. Dated August 20th. 3 days after his mother disappeared. The same day he told police he'd been mostly offline. When confronted, he shut down. "I was just curious," he said. "It doesn't mean anything." But curiosity doesn't explain hiding the truth. It doesn't explain lying about the suitcase. It doesn't explain watching your father load a wooden box into a car and saying nothing. In the end, the DA made a decision. They didn't charge Matthew with murder, but they named him a person of interest in obstruction. Accessory after the fact. No indictment was filed. But the shadow lingered. At trial, he was not called as a witness by either side. The courtroom felt his absence. The focus returned to Charles. The man with the PhD. The teacher. The one who built a box and buried a family secret inside. The prosecution painted him cold, calculating. Said the murder wasn't sudden rage. Said it was premeditated for financial control. They showed the checks, Colleen's handwriting. $6.6 million in obligations Charles never paid. Promissory notes demanding reimbursement. They argued that Charles felt cornered, disrespected, controlled. That the murder was an act of economic liberation, not just emotional collapse. But the defense pushed back. They showed photos of bruises from years past, Charles with scratches on his arms. Emails from Colleen, full of controlling language. Audio recordings of arguments, clipped from home security backups, never shared with the kids. They argued that Charles had snapped. That it wasn't money. It was years of suppression. A wife who mocked him. Children who dismissed him. And a moment where silence turned to violence. Alyssa, when called to the stand, cried through her testimony. "I fought with her too," she said. "But she didn't deserve this." When asked about her father, she paused. "I think he thought he was protecting us. But all he did was destroy what was left." In the final week of the trial, the jury heard closing arguments. Then they deliberated. 8 hours later, guilty. Second-degree murder. Plus obstruction of justice. Life in prison. Eligible for parole in 28 years. Charles didn't flinch when the sentence was read. He just looked at the courtroom gallery, and then down. At nothing. Outside, the media swarmed the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted questions. Alyssa kept walking. But Matthew? He wasn't seen leaving. Some said he used the back exit. Others said he stayed in the courtroom long after it cleared. One bailiff later said, "He just sat there, staring at the floor. Like he was still hearing something no one else could hear." It's strange how silence fills the space where truth used to live. After the trial ended, after the headlines faded, after the camera crews packed up and left the courthouse steps, there was only quiet. No one from the Rebello family gave interviews. No one issued public statements. What happened inside the 15th floor apartment at Sterling Hall remained largely unspoken, like a closed book sitting on a shelf, spine turned away, gathering dust. But the consequences of that silence lingered everywhere. Charles Rebello was transferred to the California State Prison at Solano. He began serving his life sentence 2 weeks after the verdict. In his intake file under Next of Kin, he listed no one. He refused all media requests. He declined visits. He donated his personal library, books on physics, engineering, philosophy, to the university's free shelf. He said nothing else. Alyssa Rebello eventually moved to Chicago. She changed her last name. She left her job at the Office of Government Ethics and took a position in private compliance. Colleagues described her as brilliant, but guarded. She no longer spoke about her family. When asked in one rare conversation what she missed most about her mother, she paused for a long time. Then she said, "I miss the sound of her coffee stirring in the morning. I didn't realize it was her way of saying good morning without words." Matthew stayed in California. He never returned to the apartment. He didn't sell it, didn't rent it, didn't clean it out. For almost 2 years, Sterling Hall, Unit 1501, remained untouched. Dust settled on the furniture. The balcony plants withered. The rent, deducted silently from one of Colleen's old investment accounts, continued like clockwork. Then one day, the university declared the space abandoned. The locks were changed. Inside, they found everything exactly where it had been. 2 toothbrushes. A jar of orange marmalade. A half-folded laundry basket with Colleen's blouse still draped over the edge. And in the hallway closet, tucked behind a vacuum cleaner, the drying rod. Still slightly bent. Still there. The community at Westbridge University tried to move on. Faculty meetings returned. The fall semester opened. But something had shifted. For years, Dr. Rebello had been a fixture, stoic, predictable, reliable. Now, students whispered when they walked past his old office. The engineering department placed a neutral plaque where his name used to hang. Nothing more. Nothing less. Just absence. In the months that followed, people began asking a different kind of question. Not how the murder happened. Not who helped or why. But something quieter. Sadder. What does it take to break a family like that? And even harder, how many other families are already cracked, just waiting for the silence to give way? One former neighbor at Sterling Hall recalled a small moment. She said she used to pass Colleen in the elevator every Sunday morning. She was always well-dressed. Not flashy, just precise. Like she thought about every stitch. She'd smile politely, ask how your weekend was. Never too personal. The neighbor said she once complimented Colleen's pearl earrings. Colleen smiled and said, "They're not real, but they remind me who I want to be." And just like that, she walked away. Sometimes, it's the smallest lines, the most ordinary phrases, that reveal everything. A mother trying to hold up appearances. A daughter simmering under pressure. A son who stayed too quiet. A husband who waited too long to speak. The Rebello case remains a benchmark in family crime investigations in California. Not because it was the most violent. Not because it involved fame or fortune or scandal. But because it showed that what breaks people often begins with what goes unsaid. Not every scream is loud. Some are whispered. Through clenched jaws. Behind closed doors. Under bright fluorescent lights. In the pages of unspoken resentments. Colleen Rebello is now buried in a modest cemetery just outside Fremont. Her headstone reads, Colleen Marie Rebello, 1966 to 2018. Beloved sister. Endlessly curious. A smile that never gave up. There is no mention of her role as a mother. No mention of her marriage. Just what remained. As for Matthew, no charges were ever filed. He lives quietly now. Moved inland. Works part-time at a dental clinic in Bakersfield. He doesn't speak to the press. And when asked by a former college friend what he would have done differently, he said, "I don't know if I could have stopped it, but I should have said something. I should have told the truth earlier, even if it broke him." Truth doesn't undo what's been done, but sometimes it's the only thing that survives the silence.